get back to work on the Volvo 242 project. If you remember last time, we got the engine reassembled with a new crankshaft and main bearings, or actually all the bearings. We also got that engine timed, and then ultimately all of the intake side of the engine buttoned up. So what we have left to do on that is finish up the exhaust side. So that means the turbo, the exhaust manifold, the water pipe, and then all of the plumbing on that end of things. Let's get to it.
First up is the water pipe. This fits into the back of the water pump and directs coolant to the head, radiator, heater core, and turbo. After carefully sliding it through an O-ring in the water pump, it's secured in place with a bolt in the block. Because the pipe attached to the head has a silicone hose in the middle, I can attach that afterward.
I like to use Hylamar Blue on gaskets on the engine. It helps a lot with making it easier to get them off. It's also nice when you have to stick them in place and you don't want them to fall. This is the water pipe from a Volvo 960 that's been cut and welded up and sectioned a little bit shorter. I've also added on AN fitting for water for the turbo and cut and sectioned this here because I had a couple times where this O-ring got cut on installation and you can't remove this without pulling the engine. So cut this, added in a section of hose there and just some heat shielding to protect that. This allows you to disconnect this and then you can pull that out and replace that O-ring with the engine still in the car.
In preparation for installing the exhaust manifold, I'll ensure all of the studs are tight and then make a slight modification to the gasket.
I have studs in here and I'm also using 2-piece Nordlock washers as well as silver plated nuts. And those two are especially designed for this for reasons that I don't really remember off the top of my head. So the way these are set up is that they have these serrations on the outside. You can see there's a lot of them in here. And then on the inside, there are fewer, so you want those two faces to go together. So those grab each other, and this acts as a locking washer. Next, we gotta get the gasket prepped for this. We actually have to make some modifications to it because we're using a different style gasket than was designed for this engine, so it doesn't quite fit. But it's actually an MLS style gasket from a newer C30. All right, so looking at these two gaskets here, you can see the difference. This is the old one that I used that was already modified. And you can see what we have to trim. It's just this little piece here. That will actually interfere with the water pipe that we just put on. So we're gonna remove that and then we can use this gasket. And that's all it takes.
Now the exhaust manifold can be bolted on. I applied a high temperature Cerakote ceramic coating to this manifold in a previous video, which is something that anyone with an air compressor and a cheap HVLP gun can do at home for only $35. So long as you don't have oil leaking all over your manifold, this air cure coating seems to hold up nicely, especially for the cost.
Another thing I need to address while I'm putting this back together is removing some broken off bolts that are stuck in my external wastegate for the turbo. So when I was pulling this off, both of the bolts actually stuck in there and sheared off. They started turning and then at a certain point they just ripped right out. I'm not sure what was put in here. This was actually one of the few things on the car that was touched by a shop at one point. They replaced this wastegate because they thought it had some issues when the car was on the dyno. So I don't know if they used the same crappy hardware that was in there before with the old eBay wastegate or if they used something better, but either way, these failed and I've got to drill them out. If nothing else, I'm taking this as a reminder to use quality hardware to avoid stuff like this.
First, I center punched the broken stud and attempted to drill a pilot through it. It was going well, but I didn't realize in the moment just how much I was bending the drill bit.
Well, there goes that drill bit. So much for quick and easy.
With a chunk of broken drill bit now added to the broken stud, I tried drilling with a larger bit, but that was a wasted effort. Next, I grabbed the MIG welder. If I could weld a nut onto the broken stud, maybe I could get it to thread out of the hole. The nut ripped right off, but I'll try one more time while I have the welder out. After a second failure with the welded nut plan, I remembered that I have a carbide burr which might have a decent chance of removing material, so I chucked that up in my Milwaukee M12 die grinder. I'm amazed at just how quickly this ate away at the stud until all that remained were the threads. From there, I was able to pick out the large chunks and then chase the threads with an M8 tap.
Alright, that's 4 hours of my life I'm not getting back.
Now on to the fun part, installing the turbo. It's a freshly rebuilt Garrett GTX3067R with a 0.82 turbine housing. I benefited from the sage wisdom of a Garrett insider who sized and recommended the 3067 based on my specific engine, desired boost levels, and power goals, as well as my ultimate use case as a street car. Next, the wastegate can be installed. This drops right into place, although it does have some of the worst fastener access on the entire car. I bent and flared stainless steel hard lines to connect the wastegate and boost control solenoid so that heat isn't a concern and to keep this looking nice and tidy. There's a section of silicone hose on the other end of these lines to hopefully avoid any issues with expansion and vibration, and so far these have worked out great. Next, the turbo needs to be reclocked to set the center section and compressor outlet to the correct angle. In my case, the oil return line is a pretty tight fit, and this was set correctly before, so mocking up that line will show me exactly where to clock the center section to in the turbine housing. Then I can tighten all of the bolts in the turbine housing. Because the turbo was fully disassembled when it was rebuilt, I'll also need to reclock the compressor housing. This angle is a little less crucial. I'm just looking to ensure that the compressor outlet is pointing relatively straight up without being too close to the manifold. I'm using adapters so that I can use flexible AN hoses for oil and water lines, so those can go on next. Dash 4 for the oil feed, dash 6 for the water lines, and dash 10 for the oil drain. The only gasket that I don't have on hand is one for the oil drain flange, but I do have a roll of gasket paper that I've been meaning to try out. I traced the flange as a template, and then cut it out with scissors and an X-Acto knife. With that ready, the oil drain can go on. I like attaching the flange and hose as a single assembly because the hose is short enough that there isn't a lot of flex in it. Another detail on here that I noticed when I was taking this apart is that these two water lines here for the turbo, those were starting to crack. I built these, I want to say it was like 7 or 8 years ago. They were previously just the standard sort of Aeroquip push lock hose. There wasn't any heat protection or anything on there. So I went ahead and just made some new ones using heat shielding sleeve that I had around, and then just put some heat shrink on the ends to hold that in place. So those are good to go as well. That's actually the same thing that I have on the oil drain for the turbo, and that's worked out pretty well. Before the engine goes in the car, I also want to change out the boost control solenoid. I've been using this Mac 3-port solenoid, and it works fine, but I want to see if I can improve the turbo's responsiveness by upgrading to a 4-port. Swapping out the solenoid is relatively straightforward, but, as with all things, does require some tinkering. The arrangement of ports will require different fittings with slightly revised plumbing, and I'll have to modify the bracket as well. I drilled and tapped holes for the new solenoid, and trimmed down the size of the bracket to eliminate excess material and round off the corners. Even on an engine stand, accessing this is a bit tight, so it's well worth doing this now before the engine is in the car. The hoses just need a slight trimming to fit the new arrangement, and then they can go back on, secured by spring clamps to avoid any future headaches. I'll need to change up the connector for this, but seeing as I'm building an all-new wiring harness anyway, that's no big deal. While installing all of the hoses on the backside of the head, I made sure to wrap them with Roundit 2000 self-wrapping sleeve in a few key spots. This is an easy way to protect hoses and wires from chafing and rubbing through on any abrasive surfaces. With that all out of the way, the engine itself is ready to go back in the car. Looking over at the exhaust side of the engine, we've got everything in place here now. We've got our wastegate on, we've got the exhaust manifold, we've got our turbo and plumbing in place. There are a couple things that I'm going to do in here once the engine is in the car, and that's because I need the exhaust alignment to be perfect. This wastegate return pipe actually tore in the bellows because there's misalignment in here. These flex bellows from Vibrant are not designed for any axial misalignment. They are only designed to expand and compress this way. So if there's any movement that way, that can cause it to fail, and you can kind of see there's some misalignment here. So I'm gonna rebuild that, but I wanna make sure that that fits perfectly, and to do that, I need to make sure that this downpipe is clocked perfectly. Once the engine's in the car, I will bolt up the exhaust to our V-band down here. That will then tell me the exact clocking for this, so then I can make a bracket and tie this downpipe to the bell housing flange. So I'll probably tie into a bell housing bolt here, just with a simple sheet metal bracket. It is not something that really needs to take any load. It's pretty much just there for the purposes of aligning this, really. Then I can go ahead and fabricate a new wastegate dump tube.
I can't wait to share what's coming next. Converting the ECU and building an entirely new wiring harness is a ton of work, but it's so gratifying and gets us so close to driving this again. I already have the majority of that ready to go, but that was way too much to put into one episode, so make sure you're subscribed to get notified when that episode drops. That's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in and following along with the journey. If you made it this far, consider hitting the like button or dropping a comment below to let me know that you're into this sort of thing.
Very much transitioning out of engine building stage into engine wiring stage, and then we can get back over to engine running stage. So let's get to it.